It does.
Um, do we share it to the um, Way group?
OMG way? We can.
Yeah.
We can.
I mean, you
Let's
could
get
just
this.
share from your page to it if you
Oh
want.
yeah, totally. Let's get this going right here, and then I'll see how many more we can set up. I
Beautiful.
think with the level we're at. So Glenn and I are on right now. It's broadcasting. It's live. A little different format than what you might have seen from other people or from us in the past. We've been using Zoom a lot. I think like most people have, especially recently with the pandemic and the shutdown of a lot of local businesses. But there are some fairly substantial limitations within Zoom. And the other day we encountered one, which was that we could not stream to Facebook. There was a 404 page error that Facebook was throwing us from our Zoom account. We were not able to figure it out. And so this is a platform we call that's called StreamYard. I guess we call it StreamYard as well, but it's called StreamYard. And it lets us stream to multiple places. So we are currently on Facebook in several different locations as well as YouTube. So I think it'll pull the comments in depending on how things work. But today we are going to be talking about lead generation and prospecting for your digital marketing agency. Glenn and I don't want to speak for him. I'll let him kind of introduce himself just because I don't want to assume too many people know that much about us. But I've been doing digital marketing now since 2013. Started offering that as I'd say an agency, but it wasn't really a formal agency until about 2014 or 15. What I wound up with was just a whole bunch of referrals because when I started, I was running my own construction company and was just getting a lot of work. And so I had subcontractors who did a lot of the trade work for me. And we got them like super busy and they're like, hey, what's the deal? Where's all this business coming from? And I kind of, talked to them about it, and that turned into a relationship. And so I started working on a website, and that wound up really turning into a situation where I had a kind of SEO agency, search engine optimization agency, kind of by default. It just fell in my lap. And so I didn't, set out to create this thing, but it turned into something that was really good, really lucrative. That's been in business now for 5-6 years. Glenn, you want to maybe kind of cover your background a little bit, and maybe even a little on the sales side, because you've had a lot of things that you've done before you had an agency in the digital marketing space.
Sure. Yeah, back in the early 2000s, I took what I consider to be a stupid job working for a phone book. I could have had the job probably 3 years prior to, but didn't think it was something that I wanted to do until I was in a bad position with a current employer, an employment position. And so I took a job with them. And it was I called it a part-time job. My management team didn't really like it. They called it a part-time job, but you know what? It was what it was. We made good money putting square ads on a piece of paper to put into a phone book. And around 2005, 2006, something like that, they started to go down the path of digital. So they started offering some inexpensive websites, started offering some PPC, turned into SEO display and things like that. And so I gravitated towards that side of it and worked within a group to try and develop that a little bit more until it became apparent that my ideals of how to do that were quite different than theirs. And so that's when.
Talk. You don't need to get into the details, right? We're not trying to sling mud, but some of those nuances have really become one of the things that you've been able to now see how much better service can be provided by someone who actually is knows more and has maybe a different product, or we like to think a better product, and kind of how that goes. Could you maybe flesh that out a little bit more for people who don't have that experience?
Sure. When you work for a large company, you're only going to have the information that they have and is brought down from upper levels down to you. And I think as we have learned over the last 6, 7, 8 years, that the more you develop self-knowledge and the more you understand from people out there working in it, the better your knowledge is, the better your understanding is, and the better products you're allowed to deliver. And the reality of it is these large, big box type companies that are trying to have customers fit round pegs into square holes. Basically, we have this product, this bucket, this bundle, this package. It doesn't work out well typically for the client. The only one it really works out for is the company. And so when you look at those, you end up with people like me who go out, spend a lot of time. I probably spent a year and a half, at least 2 out of 3 lunches per week on webinars, whether it be Moz, Majestic, all these different big companies out there to try and learn something. And then I actually took it upon myself to go out and speak with agency owners, developers, and things like that to try and learn more about it. And the more I learned, that their model probably wasn't the best fit for clients and for long-term sustainability and growth. And that's why I kind of left, because when you kind of learn what's the right thing to do, it's kind of hard to represent something isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, and you get in, you kind of, all of us are naive. We don't know what we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
And getting into that kind of from the sales side, you know, I kind of, I knew some things about the business side just because I'd been working in the business and I'd been sold all these solutions. And it's one of the reasons that I was kind of out of money and broke. It's because I'd spent, some decent money. Well, at the time it was a significant amount of the income I had
Mm-hmm.
trying to buy leads from other companies and this, that. It just didn't work out that well. And I was like, why is this? Because, I built and ranked my own website and I got tons of great calls from it. I'm like, what am I really buying? Like if I'm buying leads from one of these lead brokers, what am I getting? Like where are they generating their stuff? And as I got into it more and more, I started realizing it's like, like this is how things are actually done by kind of the larger agencies and organizations. I'm like, to think that I'm going to have to compete with, not to name any names, but those guys are trying to buy leads from me and then sell it 15 times. And I have a whole, the product they're selling is actually something that I'm creating, but they're just turning into a amalgamation of all sorts of just nonsense and trying to wring every cent out of it. It turns out not to be a good solution for the business. And I think that's kind of, we have that in common as far as like, okay, when we really figured out that element and that aspect of it, it kind of flipped a switch for us. It's like, okay, there's some more things I'm going to have to learn to be able to provide this as an agency or as a provider, but it's going to be better for everybody, right? I'm going to make more money as an agency owner. My client's actually going to make more money with what the services I provide are. And so that's how we each kind of got into doing what we're doing now, right? Providing services to businesses in the digital marketing space.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I mean, when you take a look at these bigger, larger companies, I mean, just take a look at it from when you have stockholders, shareholders, things like that, and how they're managing things. If you're offering pay-per-click bundles, packages, and stuff like that, where a lot of people with smaller agencies may have a 10 to 20% margin, you're probably going to have 30, 40, 50% margin. So if a company is paying twice as much for the same client, the same lead, well, then their return on investment's less. If you're doing optimization, which you and I have a lot of experience in, it's kind of hard to get someone 2, 3, 4 steps away to do proper optimization and to work for a client versus managing it in the way that we know it needs to be managed. So are they outsourcing things 1, 2, 3 different ways? Do they have multiple things? Vendors that are doing C jobs, when you keep providing C quality product, you become a C company.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think, well, it's hard to really say how some of the large agencies really got to where they were, but like you talked about the yellow pages, right? Phone books, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're an ad agency, right? They had a product, they had a platform, the book that everybody got delivered on their, front step, once a year, however often it went out. And they'd put your name and a nice little square ad in there for a certain amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to then transition that over to the digital space, and they're still doing it. They're still building now websites for people and placing ads on yellowpages.com, which doesn't really get that much traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we've kind of shared in just how easy it can be to find people, say people, I just leave it as people, but these are business people that own businesses that are advertising on platforms. And if they are spending money there's a strong likelihood that they are not getting great results from it. They're not getting a great ROI. And so we've talked about some of the methods that really you've used to get in contact with to kind of do some prospecting, right? And then that prospecting also helps qualify that business, right? They're spending money because they can't have that ad on that space unless they're spending money to get that. So now they're a business owner that is spending money on digital marketing, which means they're aware that there is a potential for a lot of traffic and new business to come in from the internet, right? It just so happens that they're in all likelihood not getting a great ROI for what they're spending. And so you can open up a conversation with them, not necessarily based on, hey, you made a bad decision, but based on, hey, you know, could you tell us more about your business, right? And you can kind of go into that. We'll get into a couple nuances and some kind of methods that we've been using that have turned out to be very successful, very generating a lot of interest very recently. I say like this past week, Glenn has been getting blown up. We've had kind of back-to-back, webinars. Glenn's being asked to speak and present at a lot of different groups and in different groups from different angles, because he's done what he talked about, which is developing a base of knowledge. He's become a resource. And one of the things that we've done over the last, this year, but specifically the last month or so, is to try to help people understand how they can also do that, right? And there's a bunch of, there's what feels like a bunch of different moving parts in any business, especially, when you got a digital marketing agency, are you doing SEO? Are you doing pay-per-click? Are you building websites? Are you running retargeting ads? Are you a social media marketer doing organic posts and then trying to boost them? Are you running social media? Like, are you doing email marketing? All this stuff, right? And you've got to figure out what you're going to offer, how to fulfill that, how to keep your turnaround time right. And what we've really kind of come into very recently over the last year, is having systems in place where we can deliver one extremely durable product that is good for the business, that we make money on, that all the systems are in place to be able to turn that around very quickly. And it's very, like, a lot of people are talking about building like a niche agency where, we would only work with gym owners, or we would only work with construction companies. And I think there's a ton of benefit to doing that, right? You start to learn the lingo, you start to learn the numbers of the business, right? You get known as the person who does, digital marketing for roofing companies. What we've done is kind of sliced it differently, and we provide a very specific product to pretty much any business that needs it. With right now, currently, the only exception that doesn't necessarily need it is a church. But we'd love to build websites for churches as well. It's just a little bit different application there. So maybe, Glenn, you could talk about kind of back into, not to keep it like kind of mysterious if people know what we're doing or not, but we build websites in a very specific way that meet or exceed current web standards, right? And what that lets us do is talk to anybody who has a website that's not built to these standards, which is pretty much every website on the planet right now, like 97% plus, from just kind of estimates. But if it's that many websites, you've got plenty of people to talk to. And that's a conversation starter. Right now, there's a lot of reasons to help educate people, right? And be kind of an information marketer about some of the implications and repercussions of having a website that's not to that standard, right? One of the easy ones that I can talk about is, if your website is not built that way, you are not doing everything you can to make that website rank well in Google or any other search engine, frankly, right? You may rank well, but there are other things you can do that are efficient, that can be signals that can help you rank better, right? And there's a bunch of other ones as well. So with that kind of groundwork, as far as what we're kind of talking about, that's kind of our main offer. You can apply it to a lot of different things. Maybe, Glenn, you'd want to jump in and start to talk about some of the activities, right? That you started kind of thinking through and being like, hey, you know what, if I'm doing this over here, this is gonna work out pretty well.
Sure. Yeah, I guess kind of like the foundation of this was back a couple of years ago, when I got frustrated over about a month when I lost about $100,000 a year worth of SEO business that had nothing to do with our fault. We were making money for people, and we still do quite a bit of optimization. That's still one of our main revenue streams. But I wanted to find a different revenue stream that was more stable, thankfully, we did this start a couple years ago prior to this whole little fun we've been having in 2020, where stable income is kind of nice for agency owners. So yeah, we build a lot of websites, and 2 years ago we started going down the rabbit's hole to be one of the leaders in the industry for what are called accessible websites, or websites that work for disabled people. So when you look at that, I mean, realistically, business owners that will work with companies like ours, like a lot of the people that we communicate with in the digital marketing industry, I'm going to guess maybe 10, 20% tops of business owners around the country actually will work with and have a budget to work with a proper optimization company to help them get where they need to be. So the reason I liked websites is almost everybody has a website. And fortunately, now with the environment we're in with ADA compliance with websites or web accessibility, most of them are not compliant. So that's what we've been focusing on, just talking to a broader range of clients than we would have in the past, because a lot of the industries working right now probably aren't good SEO clients, but they're great for having a website, having maintenance, and having being able to give them a better product, a better widget, if you will, that's out there, a better mousetrap to help them attract more clients. And sometimes just by building that better mousetrap, hey, we've had clients that you and I have talked about that went from not being on the first 10 pages to Google to just building the right website with the current links they had in place. Now all of a sudden we're number one. So being able to provide optimization just because we know how to build web pages right and perform the foundation of SEO. So that's one thing we've been focusing on a lot, especially even during the last, we've been about 6 months into this lovely lockdown and virus that we're in, is that some people aren't spending as much money on optimization, but people are still spending money on websites, on better websites, and you're always going to have people that need new or different websites for a multitude of reasons. So what I've been doing is just kind of expanding on what I did last year. Now that everything is virtual and visual, I can do a lot of presentations and talk to a lot of groups sitting here in front of my computer. So I can do 2 to 3 a day, where before, if you were traveling to go do some places, you could do maybe 2 or 3 a week. And the more we can do that, the more you and I are doing these types of things that we can share to groups, the more we're out just using information to a multitude of groups, maybe sending emails out with links to these videos, just really trying to help share and educate people and offer advice at no fee, no strings attached. It's just been amazing how much the floodgates have opened and people are raising their hands saying, oh, I like that information you shared. Can you help me with this? Or, hey, can you do that? You know, it's kind of interesting when you can do some of those things. I think I shared some information that we were talking to and just a little bit different message last Friday. And I've talked to, I think I have 10 people this week that I'm making conversations with and presentations about websites, SEOs, everything we do. It's just another way to open the door and create engagement. It's kind of like the old adage, activity breeds activity.
Yeah, one of the things I've come to kind of realize is that as I look back at what I was doing when I was a general contractor, I did home improvement stuff for people here in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I still currently live. I knew I did good work. I did right by my customers. We had a good product. Our prices were reasonable. I could walk people through how their house was functioning and how it was dysfunctioning and what we were going to do to get it right. And so there was, not only did their energy bills go down and their rooms become more comfortable, but they felt good about knowing that they'd spent money on good stuff, right? And there's a whole bunch that went into that. Problem is, nobody knew about me. I didn't know how to build a website. I didn't really know how to market very well. The sales process worked, but I didn't have any leads. I didn't have any people to talk to. And I didn't have a great system for referrals, although I did get some. That was kind of what kept me limping along long enough to get to a catastrophic failure in cash flow. So what you talked about as I got into running a digital marketing agency and helping other people, understand what I'd seen in doing that. One of the bottlenecks, right, that a lot of people encounter is, hey, I'm selling one out of every 4 or 5 or 6 people I talk to, but I'm only talking to one person a week. And you can build up a great income that way still, but a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but I can do more. Like how do I get more people to talk to? And there's a lot of answers to that. One is to rank for keywords, right? I love doing that. That's been kind of the engine that's powered a lot of the stuff that I've done in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But there are a lot of other ways to do that as well. And even if you've built a website and ranked for a keyword, you have to consider what content is on that website. There are times and there are keywords, there are search phrases that people use that don't really need a lot of great information on the page. Emergency 24-hour plumber that can be there in an hour. If you've got a phone number and you pick it up and you seem competent, you're probably going to get the job. Building a website, doing digital marketing, there's more in the conversion process. There's more in the sales process, because it's usually something that people take some time to think about, really want to see some elements in place, kind of the know, like, and trust factor. And then, like, what is it about, what can you actually do to provide the information necessary on the web or wherever, where somebody attaches you to like a meaning, an association with something that you can do, right? That was a little abstract. Let me get a little more concrete with that. So I've got, friends and family online on Facebook, and a lot of them know that I do things on the internet, right? I make money on the internet. They don't necessarily know that I do search engine optimization, or they don't necessarily know that I built a website or I do any of that. But many of them have sent people to me just because of some conversation that they had with a friend of theirs who needed something done on the internet. And they're like, hey, you talk to my cousin or my brother or I'm just using those terms loosely. I'm not speaking about any specific conversations I've had, but people be like, hey, talk to Fletch, because he does stuff online. And if he can't help you, I'm sure he knows somebody that can. Right. And that's a great position to be in, because it's that people know you're somebody that's knowledgeable enough and kind of, ethical enough or trustworthy enough that they know if they send one of their friends there or somebody they know there, you'll at least point them in the right direction if you can't help them directly. And so, playing on that, Glenn and I, in our own different ways, have been exploring ways of doing that more and more. And, there's only so many personal relationships that you can kind of have and keep track of, but the internet makes that seem like a much larger number, right? With Facebook groups, with LinkedIn groups. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook primarily. YouTube is also a great place to market. We're actually, no, we're not streaming to LinkedIn today, but we're on Facebook and YouTube both today. And it's with the purpose of getting information out there for people that are kind of in this space. Because if somebody doesn't, like, if they see your stuff and nothing clicks and they don't notice anything, they're probably not going to be necessarily like a prospect immediately anyway. So launching in and trying to sell somebody from the drop may not be the best technique. But if you start talking about websites and having a website that's built to a standard that helps you not get sued, or helps you get a 50% tax credit, or helps you get traffic from search engines, from Google search engine optimization or search engine ranking or whatever you want to call it, those are things that might get people's attention. And so today we wanted to talk about what we've been doing specifically to become people who are looked at as a resource that can help business owners understand specific aspects and elements of digital marketing that they're probably unaware of right now. Is that a good way of phrasing it, Glenn? I don't know. I talk a lot there. I never know what I say until somebody else tells me.
Well, I think right on. I mean, as you kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of businesses are in the same position you were in back then. You don't know what you don't know. And so you have to depend on what other people are telling you, what people who profess to be professionals in their industry are saying. And it's kind of interesting. It seems like you have two different school of thumbs, whether we're talking about optimization and the poor business owners, they're just getting pummeled by people that are saying, oh, we can do this type of optimization for $300 or $400 a month. Or don't waste time with regular optimization. Just work on local optimization. I think all of those things have their merits if you're being completely transparent and telling people what you're doing or what they're going to receive from it instead of selling blue sky. Conversely, it's been kind of fun when we're looking at what we're doing from professional web design versus a lot of other companies out there that profess to be that really don't offer proper services or products to their clients. I was just sharing with you, it's kind of interesting where we provide websites that work for everyone instead of most people out there are building websites that work for about 80% of the people. And I had two different instances yesterday where my proposals were half of what the other people were that were providing inferior products. So it's kind of nice to be able to get in, help small business owners do what they know, what they don't know, give them something that's actually going to be beneficial for them and explain why it's beneficial for them. And then it's amazing that once you start doing that and building up this little client base of websites that you're doing work for, doing a little bit here, a little bit there, maybe some things that you're not even getting paid for, just giving some great advice, then all of a sudden, guess what? All that optimization work that we were talking about starts coming in on the backside. Well, can you help me do this? Or, hey, I saw you built this website for my friend. Can you help me with that and this other product or this other service? So again, it's all about activity, breeding activity. The more you can find different ways to help people, the easier and quicker your agency is going to grow. The more clients you're going to help be successful. And it's kind of like that old Zig Ziglar quote: the more people you can help get what they want, the more you're going to get what you want.
Yeah. So to kind of help people orient themselves to what we're talking about, a lot of the way I come at these types of things is like reverse engineering it, right? So I'm like, okay, if I've got an ideal client on my website, how did that happen, right? How did they get there, right? And that's how you can kind of reverse engineer keyword ranking strategy, for instance, or having a website. It's like, oh, I got to have a website if I'm going to have somebody on my website. And you take it all apart and you see, okay, these are the moving pieces. These are the moving pieces that I need to have in place to have this part of the system taken care of, right? You've got a system that's about traffic. I got to figure out my framing on my camera and I'm mirrored here. Anyway, you got a system that's traffic. You got a system that's conversion, really, and you've got a system that's fulfillment. You can look at that different. I look at it a little differently, which is it tends to be like you've got a relationship, you've got a decision, and now you've got a way to deliver, a solution, right? And so, how do you build relationships? Okay, to build relationships, you have to at least sometime meet somebody, right? You have to have some common ground where you'd interact, and that's one of the things that people could do a lot more of and a lot better. And on social media platforms, whatever you may think of them for what they are or not, it's a great place to come in contact with people. And specifically, like with Facebook groups, your Facebook friends, you've got a max there. On LinkedIn, there's a lot more going on there than I realized before I got into it, right? LinkedIn groups are huge. There's a LinkedIn group you came across that was was it digital marketing, Glenn, that was like 1 million plus members in, or something incredible.
I think with LinkedIn groups, I'm in front of like 3 million people.
Yeah. So this is a group that you can post in. It's set up for people to be able to interact, and they've got some rules that you want to adhere to and things like that. But, and there's also then the nuance of how the algorithm and LinkedIn works. Like, are those people all getting notifications or this or that or the other? But you're at least fishing in a pond that has fish in it. And it's a lot of fish, even if it's a big pond and you need to know how to more strategically fish within that pond, you're at least fishing in a place that has people. And, a lot of times this is kind of the correlation or the metaphor that connects with how a lot of the big box agencies are saying, hey, you're ranked number 1 for bioremediated oil spill cleanup in Gilbert, Arizona, which means you're fishing in a pond that has maybe one person in it a year. And then they're going to find your website, and then you still may not be the person that they choose if there's other options out there. But that's kind of the difference, right? It's like, okay, if you're gonna know how to fish and you're gonna do well, go someplace where there are people that you can work with, right? And I've mixed metaphors there, people and fish, but I think people can kind of follow along with it. And then you back out one more step, and it's like, okay, well, what would help people know, like, and trust me, right? Being a resource, right? Being somebody that offers something novel, right? As humans, our brains are wired up to notice something different, notice changes, notice movement, right? These are elements of conversion, but they're way more fundamental than that. So something novel, something that's enjoyable, something that's different, something that's dangerous. Okay, well, if you can put those together in your messaging and communicate it somewhat effectively, you've now got you've got an attractive lure out there wiggling its
Mhm.
way through the water, and people, a fish, whatever. I don't want to cast people as fish, but there are certain parts of our brains that work very similarly. It's like, I need to check that out. Let me see what that's all about. And if they then click on maybe they're not going to go to your website, maybe they're not going to buy your thing immediately, but they're going to click and then maybe connect with you or see what you've got going on Facebook or some of these other social media platforms. If you've got a YouTube channel where you talk about the same thing, well, now they're already a little more immersed in this thing that you're doing, right? Whether it's digital marketing or, let's just leave it at that, because that's the space that we kind of work within. And now you've kind of had a few different touch points that they've triangulated the fact that, oh, this is somebody who actually knows what he's talking about. And another thing, he's serious enough to have been doing this and putting information out here about this. He believes that this is important, right? And if he believes it's important, it's like one of the reasons I've heard, like, our eyes have a lot of white space as humans. It's like, so other humans can tell where we're looking. It's like, oh, if I'm looking this way and Glenn sees me and he can tell I'm looking this way, he'll want to look this way too. Right. And that kind of has to do with, oh, we're a social creature. Like, if this is important enough for this person to do, maybe we want to pay attention to it as well. Right. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. And this is really just an overview today. We've got a whole bunch more planned to come out. We've done a whole lot more leading up to this, but we've played around with technology and we've gotten to a place where our systems are in place well enough where it's time to get the message out more and more about some of these elements that can help you, regardless of whether you want to work with us or not, to get more clients for your own business, right? To establish a reputation and awareness with people, to create relationships and become a resource for people.
Well, and when you have these tools, and again, I'm going to focus just on right now the environment we're in, where a lot of places in the US and abroad, you can't go out and do the networking, do the stuff that you and I have done for years. Go to a watering hole, meet some people, and try and share some information. Go to a networking group, go to a chamber group. That stuff just isn't happening right now. But when you start looking at different ways to be a little bit more creative and pivot, if you will, there are a lot of, let's say you live in Chicago, Illinois. You can probably go and Facebook, find some business groups in Chicago, Illinois. And as long as you understand that you want to do information, not sell anything, just trying to be a resource, like you said, and I think you're just kind of proving that you're valid, a professional and expert in your industry. You could be a plumber, you could be an attorney, you could be a digital marketer. It doesn't matter what you are. I haven't seen a admin of a Facebook group yet that would say no when I asked, would it be okay if I come on live maybe once a week, once a month, share some information with your members and let you guys just ask questions and be a resource for you for our types of services. People in a lot of these groups are just out trying to sell, and they don't want to be solicited all the time, but they're looking for resources to help them share with their other business owners how to run their businesses better. So, I joined one, and a couple of us are going to start a little weekly broadcast in it. It's 5,000 business owners. You know what? Are we trying to sell anything to them? No. We're just trying to help them, give them advice, so that way when they do have someone else coming, that maybe we can help them set up a red flag that says, no, I don't think this is what I should be buying, or this service doesn't seem right. Will some people reach out and hire us? Sure. Will it be beneficial for us? Yeah. I think in my experience, anytime you start doing the right thing for the right reason and thinking about others instead of ourselves, everything comes back on the backside probably stronger than if you're just focusing on yourself. So in this day and age, if you can get into some groups, share some information, get used to broadcasting like this in front of people, I think you'd be amazed at how quickly you can offer different products, and make more money, even in an age where we're working out of our bedrooms instead of working out of offices or out there talking to people face to face.
Yeah, one of the things that I really kind of geek out on, and I love to work on and try to get right, is representing things properly. And, you know, I've done a lot of training and put hundreds of hours of video on the internet, and have been, you know, kind of one of the teachers or trainers or coaches in different groups, helping people learn things that they could do to grow their business, to offer those solutions and services to other businesses. Invariably, some of the people who buy the training are like, oh my gosh, this is so, I can't do this. Would you just do this for me? Right. And so I kind of, I've thought on that a lot, because it happens enough that I'm like, okay, so, you know, what Glenn and I are talking about, put information out there for free. Right. Okay. I've got everything I've ever taught about SEO is available on the web for free. It is. You can go find it. Yeah. I'll point you to it. It's not a big deal, but there's a level at which the complexity and the ability to get it done is more efficiently taken care of by somebody with all those systems already in place than it would be for you to put those systems in place in your own business. Right. And so a lot of people are like, well, how much information should I get? All of it. Like there's absolutely, I see very few problems with putting all of your secrets out there, because if it's not going to come back in any bad way on you. You're not going to have less business because of it. It's not some little secret that, you know, that, boy, if I hold on to it, it's becoming more and more valuable. It doesn't work that way. What you can think of is like, oh, you're marketing, you give some stuff away free, and then at a certain point they got to buy to get more. Well, why? Like the buy to get more, it's like, well, you need to consider that at a certain point, their life is only going to be better by somebody else handling this, right? Do they want to do it all themselves? In all likelihood, no. They might think they do, but when it really comes down to it, there's a lot going on with a lot of these things, and I don't like to have to do them all myself, right? So we have partners, we have outsourcers, we have, you know, people and things in place, and people trained to do these things well and reliably, right? And so if you can help people understand that this is an important element that they need to have in their life, in their business, if they can do it themselves, awesome. But if you have it as a service you can provide, offering to sell it to them when they ask, is there's nothing wrong with that either. But you don't have to really think like, well, how much should I, like, what should I teach? What should I help people with? Go in there and tell them what the elements of on-page SEO are. That's fine. Right? I've done that. It did not hurt at all how much training we sold when I was doing SEO training. It did not hurt at all the number of clients that I got to my SEO agency. If anything, it helped. And it helped in a bunch of different ways. People would see it and realize it is complicated. I want to talk to you because you obviously know what you're talking about. Right? If you restrain and you don't talk about the complexity and the nuances of these elements, you may not come across as enough of an expert that they want to talk to you and trust you. Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that? I kind of railed on that for a second, but
I have a perfect example of that. I had a gentleman that reached out to me wanting to buy leads from me because he came across a site that I own last week that I'm outranking him already on Bing and Yahoo just because the website's built properly. We built them like 6 weeks ago or 8, so we're still working to get the rankings up on Google. And he realized he was an intelligent enough guy that they're type lead gen type websites, and he wants to buy leads. And so we're looking at his websites. And when he initially called me, we spoke for probably about 20 minutes before we set up the next call. And we took a look at his sites, and his developer built them, and just happened to be the one theme that WordPress has kind of spanked in the last few weeks for not following their rules. So, but to bring this up to him, just to kind of show him, you know what, your developer may have used a theme that maybe wasn't the best for you. Then we kind of had I was able to do a little bit more research when we set up our second call. I think it was yesterday or the day before. And to be able to kind of get a chuckle because they're using a page building system, on-page system that I was part of, and I taught it at different groups 2-3 years ago. And I kind of got a chuckle out of it when we went through this, and I kind of explained to them, I said, you know, they had the right concepts because I've shared this concepts with other marketers across the internet. I said, but they didn't execute it right. And I kind of walked through like 2 or 3 steps of just your primary on-page components just for conversion that we talk about all the time, Fletch. And the guy's like, no one's going to call me from this. Why would they do this? And I said, I don't know. I said, I apologize. I said, maybe, if they actually learned it from a conference I was at speaking about or something like that, maybe they wrote down some of the things, didn't write down all the details. But I said, there's a difference between working with the student and the person that's teaching the course sometimes, and how to get through all the details and intricacies. Or maybe it's just that I'm anal as hell and I make sure I follow every little dot, every I, and cross every T. I don't know. And we have systems in place to make sure.
No comment.
But make sure everyone that works for us does that. I mean, if you don't have sales process in place, if you don't have these schedules, kind of to what you were talking about, different people running agencies. I remember when I quit my job, gave my wife a heart attack, and started mine. I had one goal at that point, was to sell one new website every week. Because back then I knew I could do that, and then I would get some SEO business. And it wasn't a bad way to get started. Back then I was selling for $2,000, $2,500, and my goal was to try and make $10,000 a month to pay our bills and stuff like that. And again, I hate to start talking money because some industries think, when they talk about our industry, they think it's kind of crazy and stupid. But whatever your goal is, if you can find a way, I didn't create a company for myself at that point. I created a job. And it was a job that paid my family's bills. We lived great in a nice house in a nice part of town. But if you want to then kind of go beyond that, you have to find some type of system, some type of partnership, some type of network to be able to go from selling one website a week to 4 websites a week, or 10 websites a week, or to go from bringing on 1 to 2 SEO clients a month to 4 clients to 10 clients and stuff like that, because you only have so many hours in a day, a week, or a month. Most of us would like to have some social life as well, maybe spend some time with our family. I know, when I was doing this, my girl's a little bit older than yours, but when you have a 6 and 7-year-old, you probably can't work 18 hours a day for any long period of time. And if you do, you're probably not being a very good parent. So the only way to continue to expand and bring on more revenue, have a larger company, is to either hire people, understand and build your own systems to develop that, or to find strategic partners to align with. Because if you can, at some point, bring on more of this business over here that you're not working on, and then it expands into other parts that you want to do that maybe you enjoy more, why not do that and work smarter instead of harder?
Yeah, one of the things I realized as I got more into this, and I was not, I was always independently employed, kind of like you talked about. I always owned a job, so to speak. I never really had a company. There was not, I did some software stuff and that worked really well, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together for a while. But what you're really looking at doing is, attacking these bottlenecks in your business. And if it's lead generation, it's lead generation. One of the other elements that I realized is that I could really fall down on really fast is when you've got complicated services you're providing, right? Unless all of your back end processes are really dialed and the people are in place and the, QA QC type of the oversight and management is in place for that as well. That can wind up getting so much of your attention that it can make it very quickly feel like you don't want more customers, because it's like, oh my gosh, did we get that done for that client on time? And why are these people upset? Did they get their report? And have we talked to them yet? And we need to set up this meeting because we've got a monthly status call that was in our contract. And there's just a lot of moving parts, right? And so, so that's another element that you can use, that you can explore, that you can understand and experience and communicate to people as to, okay, I'll teach you all this stuff. You go subscribe to my YouTube channel, watch all my stuff. No matter, you can get it all. But beyond a certain point, there's a lot of complexity and complication you're getting ready to add to your life if you're going to try to do this yourself, right? And so understanding that, don't just necessarily use my words or somebody else's words or whatever. They might turn out great and they're a great quote or whatever it might be. But the more you understand that, the more you feel it. And the more you feel it, the easier communicating along these gradients and these lines is going to go. It's going to feel like, oh, I don't mind telling people, what links are about or how to optimize pages or what search engine optimization is really, kind of built upon. And I think kind of getting into that, that's why it's very helpful to understand things and not just like, I just do that process, right? If you understand what's going on, you can you can start to see angles and start to see gaps in things other people are doing. And you talked about one of the things that we've really been able to get in and work with is that there are a lot of businesses in the United States that do not have a lot of budget to spend on marketing and advertising on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis, for instance, right?
National average is 3,000 a year.
Yeah. So you say average.
Yeah.
So for every company, like, I don't know, Microsoft, who's spending, I don't know, 10 million, how many businesses does it take that have $500 a year? Yeah. Or less to bring that average down. Maybe they threw who knows how they ran the statistics. I'd want to look at it, but regardless, there's some truth in those numbers. And there are a lot of people I've talked to. I know that, I understand sales and marketing, and one of the first elements you want to get is like get people to want it before you help them justify the price. And you can get people to really want what we can do, and there can be a ton of justification on the price, but if they don't have the pockets for it, they can't pay, right? And so then it's like, well, now what, right? Like, how much can I take off of my offer to maybe make it work for them? And with a lot of things that were done in kind of the traditional SEO model, there wasn't a lot, right? And I say traditional, everybody's got their own traditions, but what I'm talking about is a lot of the common models that were talked about and sold. And so, while we had clients that we were taking care of for maybe $500 a month, they weren't getting great results. They were getting good results. They were making money with what they were spending. But if they could have bumped it to 1,500 or 2,000, they'd got a lot more. And frankly, if they could have spent $200 a month and had an extra $300 to play with on pay-per-click, they might have got better results too, right? And so there's a whole lot of businesses that we were not really able to help beyond realizing they had a pain in their business, which they were infinitely aware of anyway, I'm sure, which is, I don't have enough money. But we didn't really have a great solution for them, right? We couldn't do a whole lot to help them with getting more traffic from the internet, to keeping more money in their tax money and all that kind of thing. Well, this is how my brain goes. It kind of goes all over the place. One of the things that you talked about that I didn't bring up specifically with kind of our current offer with what we do with Web Alley, right? You talked about most people build websites for 80% of the people, right? That was not something I talked about specifically, but would you go into that and talk more about why you said that and why it's really verifiable and what that 20%, like I could do some math off the top of my head and I'm sure it would be wrong, but it would give people an impression of how much money is getting left on the table if you are not building a website that those other 20% of the people can utilize properly and correctly.
Sure. Basically, in a nutshell, it deals with building a website that's going to work for everyone, regardless of their ability or disability. So right now in the U.S., 1 out of 5 people basically has one form of one of these long-term disabilities or another. Either they can't see well, they can't see colors well, they can't hear, they don't hear well. Maybe they have a combination of hearing and seeing disability. Maybe they have epilepsy, which just blew my mind when I found out about this, because I was always a fan of having motion or movements on a site that thankfully Flash is about dead. Should have died a long time ago. But having motion on your site that moves at too quick of a speed can actually induce a seizure for someone with epilepsy.
Now, you said Flash, not Fletch, correct? You don't want me dead, do you?
No, I want Fletch forever. It's Flash.
Flash media, yeah. I was joking, yeah.
And then people with motor skill issues. So maybe you're an amputee. Maybe you have MS, MD, cerebral palsy, something that makes it difficult for you to be able to function with a mouse. And then finally, cognitive issues. That's a big gray area for different types of dyslexia, all those different words that I can't pronounce very well, so I'll just stop at dyslexia. So you have to have a website that's built to work for everyone, because that covers 20% of people with permanent disability. Now, those are numbers that we can quantify. Now, how about if we look at temporary disability? I have a broken arm. I know there was a time when I broke my collarbone. Of course, it was before I used a mouse very much, because it was back almost 20 years ago. But still, if you can't do something for a short term, is your website built properly so that you can control everything with a keyboard or with your cell phone? How about environmental disabilities? How about you have a young adult that has a child in one hand and their phone in the other? Does your website work properly on a phone so they can complete everything they're trying to do? So where we say that our websites definitely work better for 20% of the people, I think they're going to work better for larger numbers. We just can't quantify them, so I don't want to guess or speculate on what those numbers are. But you need to have a website that will work in any situation for whomever is trying to conduct business with you. Otherwise, they're going to hit that proverbial back button and go somewhere else. And that's what you don't want someone to do. If you get someone to your website for your product or service, you want to make sure that you can engage them and them to become a client.
Yeah, one of the things that I've come to first notice, I heard it, and it was from someone I very highly respect and trust, but it simple wins in the conversion game. As soon as you cross over into the confusing category, if you start creating confusion in the person that's engaged with your media, your content, you're on a slippery slope that falls away very quickly. Confusion is bad, period. Right? Simple websites, simple conversion processes, funnels, whatever you want to call them, are going to win, period. Right? The more complicated and convoluted all of this stuff is, it looks neat. There might be some A/B testing that can show it's better than another something that's equally complicated but different. But overall, in general, simple wins. So coming at conversion from a position of, I will not cross this level of complexity where confusion can be the result. When you start looking at the way your forms are labeled, I've used forms on websites for 6-7 years, and I went back and started looking at it. They're not labeled well. People don't necessarily know what in the world they're supposed to put there. I put a little sentence, hey, give me your information about what you do in your business, but I could have done a much better job of describing that in a way that was more clear, and that also worked for people that I was not even really considering. Bad on me, who maybe any number of reasons were not able to engage with what I suggested they do at the next point of the conversion process, right? And so being able to take somebody by the hand, so to speak, proverbially, and walk them all the way through, very helpful. So the simpler that conversion process is, the better. It just so happens that building websites to the WCAG, the Worldwide Consortium of Accessibility Guidelines, is that?
W3C is the Worldwide Consortium.
Yeah,
WCAG is Website Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Content accessibility. I always want to blend the two because the W3C created the WCAG, right? Yeah. And so that was kind of what that standard, so to speak, that those guidelines were based on. Hey, what do we need to hit to make sure that people can interact with and engage HTML, right? This is how the web actually works. Way beyond SEO and those conversations are way down the road from, hey, how is a browser going to interpret this information? What are they going to do with it? What's the markup language that's going to be used? The HTML elements, the schema, the ARIA, right? ARIA was something I was completely unaware of until the last year, right? Mm-hmm. And these are standards and languages used on the internet to help browsers interpret information that are on web servers. And so, if you're looking at very specifically search engine optimization, so to speak, right, there's several variables that are massively influential. You get those right, you're going to rank a lot of times. And then you pile on influence from other places and things tend to work well, right? I understand that. These other elements are going to ensure that you can be most efficient with the things that cost the most in search engine optimization. The things that cost the most in search engine optimization, if you're not doing them yourself, is getting links, right? So being able to be much more efficient with the links you get to rank your website is an efficiency play, especially when you can increase potentially the number of people that you can throughput all the way to a conversion element. by including another 20% that you were not catering to before that. And the interesting thing is, I thought about this kind of problem, you know, like people have asked me on office hours that I've run for years, right? So say the the information that you get back is that 1,000 people are doing this keyword search, right? And then there's numbers about, okay, well, the first position gets 50% of the clicks, and the second position may get 20, and the third position may get 10, and then everything else is spread out. And then, magically the 10th position gets, a bump. You kind of want to be 10 instead of 9. Like, and I'm looking at that, and it adds up to 100%. And I'm like, this is not how people use the web. I can't tell you how many times, and I think probably a lot of people have done the same, is you do a search and you click on one of the results, and then you back, and then you go to the next result because it didn't work, and then you go back and you go to the next person. And so that number should not have added up to 100%. It should not have added up to 1,000. It should have likely added up to probably closer to 2,000. And so those are things people don't think about a lot. Not that I was some, brilliant, but I just had the luxury, I guess, of really trying to think about these things and understand how to interpret them, because that is big. Like, who are the people that are bouncing out of those position 1, 2, and 3? Like, bounce rate's not good for your SEO. Not ever going to be a good thing. So if you're in position 4 and you've got a website that works for somebody who may be colorblind, and they do a search and the first 3 people don't, and they bounce out of all 3 of those, and they go to your position 4, you've now not had to pay for getting to number 1. You're at 4. You still got the traffic, and all of their SEO suffered because of what you did with your website. It's a cool thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and we look at accessibility, and you and I've had this conversation several times. What are you accessible to? There's a reason why some of us that have followed W3C for years, I think we're a little bit more successful than other people, because you want a website that's accessible to all the users, but you also want a website that's accessible for Google. Because if you follow these guidelines and treat Google, like I said a few years, as a third grader, and make it easy for them to understand what this page is about, what type of services you're offering, where you're offering them, now Google's going to understand it better. The people that land it's going to understand it better. It's kind of, some people call CRO, conversion rate optimization. I kind of look at it as buyer psychology. Google's my buyer, so I need to make sure that my website works good in a psychological manner so that they understand it and they're going to deliver it. And then depending on the type of services my clients are providing, are they thinking, if you'll call it left brain, right brain, emotional, analytical? Are we catering to those type of people so that Google serves you up better, more people come to it, more people can use it, more people buy it? You have little incremental things that add to your own internal algorithm that are going to make your sites more productive and have a better return on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, today, I don't want to, drag this on too long, but what we wanted to cover is kind of just the overview of how to generate, so to speak, how to start creating and facilitating opportunities to get into good relationships with people on the internet that you might be able to either do business with directly or who can refer to you. The reason that I wanted to get into a lot of these specific elements, these are the things that you want to explore and expand upon in your own marketing, right? Do a write-up on, this 20%, right? It's kind of like maybe Pareto principle. We could combine, you can come up with whatever you want as long as it makes sense and it's congruent and cohesive. But each of these things that we talked about today are a piece of content. And if you're out in, say you really like working with real estate agents and you live in Austin area, right, of Texas, join a realtors association or a marketing, there's going to be some associations that have a lot of realtors, right? I don't work with realtors that much, but all that is to say, join one of those groups, and read through, get an idea of what the folks are talking about, what their struggles are, what their pain points might be, what their questions are, what their offer is, right? There's going to be people in there trying to sell. Okay, let me click on their website and figure out what this is. And then create some content, right? And we've shared several dozen just single elements that you can say, hey, you guys might not have thought about, a client who's going to know that they may need to spend a little bit more money on a house because they are in a wheelchair or they are, um, you know, visually impaired or blind, right? And so they know they've got a very specific thing. Is are you able to cater to someone like that, right? This is a kind of an ideal client. I say ideal, I don't know, maybe, but it's a specific client that needs a service provider, right? A realtor. Have you thought about that there might be a lot of people in your area who need that, right? And here's the numbers, here's the statistics, right? And here's what can be done on the web to make sure that your website can help with people like that. Oh, and and then just leave it at that, right? It's just information, right? Can help them grow their business if there are people like that. I don't know, Glenn, does that spark any ideas for you? And then we'll kind of maybe talk a little bit more and wrap up here pretty quick.
Yeah, well, it did. I think we can kind of kind of combine the two of them. I mean, Web kind of, or Fletch kind of mentioned that we have a joint venture called Web Alley that we're opening back up again, just to try and help marketers understand they can have solutions for this, maybe help them understand some better ways to sell, some better ways to get in front of people, and then some better products to sell. I mean, some of the things that we're going to be going over in there is where we're seeing online go offline. So to help marketers know how they can go in and talk to some businesses to get their foot in the door, just by helping them maybe with their pictures on their maps, their pictures on Yelp, their pictures on their websites, that in some states are actually creating lawsuits because they're actually taking pictures of what are called obstacles
Like
for
physical
people,
barriers. Yeah.
physical barriers for people with disabilities. So just trying to help marketers, A, find better ways to get in the door, B, find better ways to be able to communicate with more people, to find ways to, again, try and start adding on in this day and age, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a week worth of business, and to start maybe stop going south with what's happened with a lot of people that we've talked to out in the industry, that their businesses are down quite a bit because of optimization. Maybe having a different, better product to get in the door with, to sell to people, to start building their agencies back up again, coming back out of 2020 stronger than they are right now, and help businesses have better products.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so Glenn and I have been doing a lot of webinars. We recorded most all of them. We've been kind of building the library up, and there's a lot of really interesting conversations that we've had with people that are in this, that are affected by this industry one way or another, right? Some conversations we've had with lawyers, some that are on either side, right? Some that are mostly defense, some that are mostly prosecuting. So it can kind of help you understand kind of that element. We've talked with a lot of people who are on the physical barriers, as Glenn talked about, a lady who does assessments of businesses, and this was something that really opened my mind to, like, foot in the door. Like, there are, like, you can imagine, if you're familiar with like a Google My Business or a Yelp, okay, there's going to be pictures of the inside of that business, and if those pictures are like, there's ways of making money with those pictures. You can go in and offer that as a service you provide to the business owner. Okay. Um, if you don't take, if you take pictures that do not include and feature the elements that make that business accessible, you have opened the door for somebody that might be a serial litigant or malicious to visit that facility and see whether or not they've got a ramp, or they've got a wheelchair accessible stall in their bathroom, or they've got a low enough countertop. Okay, so because of that, no people providing Google My Business photo services are talking about that. You've got an absolute way to talk to everybody that has a Google My Business and wants to use it well, which is pretty much any business that I can think of, with a piece of information and an angle that nobody else is talking about. Okay, that is something to discuss, right? And then where does it go from there? Well, it can go any number of places. As Glenn talked about, we've got a business that we're partners on with another guy named Mike Hayden, that we do this, right? We fix websites and we bring them up to standards. But in addition to that, we've got a ton of other resources to help educate you on this coming tidal wave, right? Everything is going from kind of the Wild West online to becoming licensed and more professional and needing to meet certain standards, because there's enough money and there's enough, it's kind of gentrified enough where these things are coming into play. And I say I kind of wish it wasn't that way. I'm not a real big fan of government, I tend to kind of lean way toward the libertarian side, but I the thing is that this is what's happening. It's already happened. It's been in place for a while, and so kind of arguing with it on a that's not a conversation that helps anybody win in business, right? We want to help people win business and do good by their client, save their client money. So if you want to find out more information about that, Glenn, are we sending people the website, or we want to so we've got a website, obviously, right? And we've got a Facebook group that we use for marketing purposes. We'd love to have you in either one of those. Web Alley is actually spelled kind of interestingly. Glenn, maybe you can talk about that. I'll post it in the chat.
Yeah, it's Web, W-E-B, A11Y. So A11Y. It's what's called a numeros. Basically, there are 11 letters between A and Y in accessibility. So that's why we cabbaged onto Web Alley for the name. So yeah, we have the Web Alley Facebook group where you can ask questions. We disseminate information. We share videos there frequently. We have weballey.net, again, weba11y.net. So yeah, anyone that's interested can please jump over into there, take a look at them. We're going to be sharing more information. And, to cabbage on that, Fletch, I'll give one last little nugget here. I was actually at a car show last night talking to a roofing company owner, and we decided to walk over across the parking lot to a Mexican place for maybe a taco and a cerveza. Can't confirm or deny that we had a beer. But we're standing there, and this is in California where everyone's eating outside now because you can't eat inside, but you can have little tables outside. And their paint for where they're doing it right now, they may not be liable, but they may. Their paint for their handicap parking where everyone has tables on right now is faded. So how about this? If you're just trying to create a little niche business like you mentioned, how about looking at all the businesses in your city, look at their Google Earth, looking at this, and if they see faded paint, contacting the business owner, maybe helping them with their pictures, and then maybe find a painting company that pay you $50 a lead. You may not get rich, but if you can make 50 or $100 off of fixing some pictures, $50 off a lead from your painting guy now is making money if he's struggling right now as well. And now all of a sudden you're, again, getting your toe in the door with businesses all across your neighborhood.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the little, it's kind of like a bootstrap way. It's one of the things that I did in I guess you could look at what I did when I started transitioning between being a general contractor and being a digital marketer or an online marketer, is I just kind of looked at things that I could do that I was already doing, and it's like I was generating phone calls and my subs were doing a lot of the work. So, hey, if I don't have to go out in the field and I can make as much money because I can facilitate more jobs, but I can stay home, I'd like that. That'd be kind of nice, right? And just kind of go with it, from there. But anyway, these webinars are going to continue, and we'll continue streaming them to and from. We've also got a lot of people that we'll be talking to, guests that we not only have had on in the past, but want to kind of revisit conversations with them. And certainly, if you've got any questions or anything, feel free to reach out through Messenger on Facebook. I get a ton. They may get shuffled into spam, but find a way of getting in touch with us. You can also contact us through weballey.net. Do we have a catch-all email on that, Glenn? You've got a question specific?
Yeah, but I would say the best way is probably just to post in the Web Alley Facebook group. That way, either you, Mike, or I will see it. Since Mike's in Australia, he's awake when we're asleep, and vice versa. So I think the Web Alley Facebook group is probably the best way to make sure that one of us will see it 24 hours a day.
Let me grab the link, because we've got a Web Alley business page, and then we've also got a Web Alley group. So let me grab the Web Alley group URL and post it in the chat before we wrap this up. You guys can click on this and request to join, and we'll approve you through that way too. All right, cool. Those should have been posted now to both YouTube and Facebook. So you can look in the chat if you're just listening to this and find the link to not only our website, but to that Facebook group to find out more information. But Glenn, have you got any parting words before we wrap up today?
No. Well, I shouldn't say no. I always have something to say. The big thing that, again, I would focus on is if you're struggling, if you're not having the numbers where you want to, activity breeds activity. So come into the group, hang out with us. We'll be happy to share some tidbits or ways for you to have more activity, to try and get in front of more business owners, even if you're not really leaving your home and going out in front and talking to people. You can still get in front of people. You can still find solutions for them, and you can still make some money.
I love it. I think it's a perfect way to wrap up today. So until next time, guys, take care. We'll see you then.
See ya.